Kisukukit, ʔamakʔis, Katie Phillips, ʔamakʔis yakit aknukleat. Our vision as Ktunaxa people is to be strong, healthy citizens and communities, speaking our languages and celebrating who we are and our history in our ancestral homelands, working together, managing our lands and resources within a self-sufficient, self-governing nation, and affirming our inherent rights by defining what health and wellness looks like for our people. As a sovereign people with a distinct culture and language, we define what health and wellness means to us through our social sector framework and value genuine allyship that recognizes the Ktunaxa people as the stewards of these lands historically since time immemorial, as well as our continued stewardship.
So ki so kyokit, ʔamakʔis nitstach ana, aki susapiach, ʔamakʔis ʔakam. My English name is Joe Pierre, and in the Ktunaxa that I was speaking to you, I introduced myself. I said, my name is Susapiach. That's the Ktunaxa way of saying Joe Pierre, or Joseph Pierre. So my English name is Joe Pierre. My Ktunaxa name is Nitstach Ana. The other thing that I said to you was ʔamakʔis ʔakam, which means I'm a person from Akam. I'm Ktunaxa Nation citizen. What we know is the Kootenays here in BC. This is Ktunaxa homelands, and I feel like my home is the Kootenays. Ktunaxa, Ktunaxa, that's the way we spell it. Ktunaxa. So that X actually is a sound. We don't really have sounds in the Ktunaxa language that the X is used for in the English language. And so when they were working on a written form of our language, we decided to use that X to represent that sound in our language. So Ktunaxa. Now, as far as the meaning, Ktunaxa, the way that I know it is that there's an old story about a battle that was being waged between the Ktunaxa and an enemy of ours. And so that warrior approached the other nation who we were lined up against and was successful in breaking through and really getting the battle happening. And the Ktunaxa warriors rushed in and there was a battle. But that warrior, that first one, the one that had the vision, when he was battling against the enemy, he would take his spear and he would lick the blood off his spear from the enemy. And he would raise his spear up and he would yell out, Ktunaxa, Ktunaxa. The meaning with Ktunaxa, what he was doing when he was killing and licking that blood off, is that Ktunaxa, we lick the blood of our enemy off of our spear, is what Ktunaxa, I guess, ultimately means. And so the Kootenays here in BC, this is the southeast corner of BC, but Ktunaxa homelands extends down into the United States, Montana. When you're looking at that map, this northwestern portion of North America, you'll notice a very large water system, like river system, and it's the Columbia River system. And so there are, from what I've been told, 3 tribes that are on the Columbia River here in BC and Canada. And then as far as I understand, there's 15 other tribes that are on the Columbia River all the way out to the mouth on the Pacific Ocean. But Ktunaxa, we are the group that exists right at the headwaters of the Columbia River. Kootenay River comes out of the Rocky Mountains and it's right close to the headwaters of the Columbia River. Our creation story talks about those 2 rivers. It's very much a part of our creation story. At this time, there are 2 giants that are alive. One is a giant of the water, so occupying the Columbia and the Kootenay River system. And there's a giant of the land. This giant of the land puts together a hunting party to hunt down the giant of the water because that giant of the water is breaking laws. A couple of the laws that are usually cited about this giant in like the storytelling that I heard over my lifetime, you know, when I was just little and elders were telling me the story. And our name for the water giant, ʔamakʔis, is that he was going around killing at will, just killing whoever and whatever he wanted to kill. And the second law that he was breaking was a law of consumption. Like he was killing, but he was also consuming just as much as he wanted. And so they formed a hunting party. The hunting journey, like the chase of that ʔamakʔis, were in those 2 rivers. The Columbia River going up around the big bend of the Columbia, back down, and eventually into the Kootenay. But what happens is that while that chase is happening, the land giant is naming places. Because just before this hunt starts, in our language we say Napika, which is the Great Spirit or the Creator. Napika had come to what we call ʔamakʔis, and that's all living things at the time. and had told all of the chiefs that human beings were coming to the earth, that they would be here soon. Because this is what I'm talking about in our storytelling. This chase and these two giants, they existed before human beings were here on the earth. This is just before the human beings were here. And so part of the idea is when they were chasing that giant in the two rivers, is the land giant was naming places because they had heard that humans were coming. And so they were giving names to places so that the humans would know the names and the stories behind these places. And like so many indigenous people around the world and indigenous nations around the world, you ask them, what's your name for yourselves? They'll say ʔamakʔis or whatever that name might be, right? And usually, like 9 times out of 10, the translation into English is going to be the people. And so for us, that's the same for Ktunaxa as well. Our word for ourselves, ʔamakʔis, we call ourselves ʔamakʔis. And the best we can translate that into English is the people, the human beings. By the time they finally catch up to that giant of the water, he is eventually destroyed. He's killed for the crimes that he was committing, right? They said he was killing at will and consuming as much as he wants. So they destroyed that giant. And the giant of the land took the body of that giant and spread it around the world. In the way that we say our storytelling is that the human beings of the world came from that body of that monster, right? It was distributed all around the world. And so what I've always loved about that is that, in fact, our Ktunaxa creation story is actually a single source DNA story as well. There are still Ktunaxa who are telling the Ktunaxa sovereignty story or creation story in our own homelands. I'm one of those people. I'm trying to make sure that there are going to be Ktunaxa after me that will continue telling the story.
Kisakyukye ʔamakʔis hunani Ktunaxa ʔakikachi akisqanak ʔausaqani su'ukanaqin hunani matnam hunani palki hunani Ktunaxa ʔamakʔis. Hi, my name is Martina. I am a Ktunaxa woman from Escutin First Nation. I currently reside in the Okanagan Territory, and so I am a nation member who lives away from home. And I am an Indigenous health and well-being practitioner that supports my community with wellness planning, especially around the toxic drug crisis for a nation healing strategy, as well as with language revitalization planning. What gives me pride as a Ktunaxa woman is the strength of our people and the fact that we are still here, we're still pushing for our rights that are our inherent rights given to us from ʔamakʔis, the creator. I started learning my language as a child. I grew up in my grandmother's house and I learned words here and there, like common commands around the house, like sana, come here. A lot of suksik, you're picky, asakanoon, sit down, you know, really basic phrases around the house, but I wasn't exposed to Ktunaxa language in fluent form in my own home. As my grandmother is a residential school survivor, she went to the St. Eugene Indian Residential School, Kootenai Indian Residential School it was called at the time. I returned back to it when I was 23 years old after having my first child. I realized that becoming a mother, it was really important to me for my children to have a connection to Ktunaxa language and culture, and that it was important for me to pass it on. I always knew that there was a connection between social work and language revitalization, because when you think about why we have so many people who do not know their language, it's because of the Indian residential school system, it's because of intergenerational shame, intergenerational trauma around learning language and around practicing culture and having to go underground with our traditional practices. So I had this understanding that there are broader impacts that are impacting language loss and the ability to carry on language. And the fact that so many of our people have a desire to learn our language and culture, but don't know where to start or are too afraid to move to that next step, or just simply don't have the tools and resources in front of them to be able to do that.
Gisagiki Gapiniskith, who got click Jared Basil, who got Gache Yakanuki, and I am a Ktunaxa Cultural Framework Ambassador with the Ktunaxa Nation Social Sector. The Ktunaxa social sector developed a practice framework in conjunction with Ktunaxa elders, service providers, government leaders, youth, and communities, and developed a practice framework which articulates 7 practice approaches to be cognizant of when engaging with the nation. The practice framework really allows us, again, to exemplify who we are as Ktunaxa citizens and as Ktunaxa people offering services within our own territory, and so that speaks to self-determination. I think in the same breath, self-determination also speaks to our sovereignty, and it really allows us, again, to articulate and demonstrate what's important to us as Ktunaxa as it pertains to service delivery, but also at the same time, it allows folks to know that we as Indigenous people will always be the subject matter expert on ourselves. And again, really allows us as Indigenous people to be in the driver's seat, really person-centered, and allows us to focus on people instead of focusing on problems, which again, I think directly translates to that self-determination piece, which will eventually translate into Ktunaxa sovereignty. But also at the same time, we want to braid together Indigenous ways of knowing and doing with Western education, medicine, and science. And when we can braid together and really truly walk alongside each other, defining what health and wellness means to us within ʔamakʔis Ktunaxa, it will allow us to ensure that services that are being offered within the territory are grounded in Ktunaxa values, are grounded in our beliefs, our natural laws. The words are aknumutstitlit. The words ganagitsi, we not, directly speaks to our beliefs and our laws and our values. And I think if we can offer services that are grounded in those values, it will empower future generations to know that they can see themselves in the work, but also allows us to pay homage to past, present, and future generations in that way.
Kisukukit, who got click, Dallas Cardinal-Clement. My Indigenous name is Escutin. It means house on stilts, woman. I am from ʔamakʔis, so that means people of the dense forest. We've lived here for more than 10,000 years. I was born in Edmonton, where my mom was from, but we moved here to Cranbrook, more specifically on this reserve, ʔamakʔis Reserve. I also have a lot of pride because I am one of the first Ktunaxa women to get their Bachelor of Science degree in nursing. I graduated 5 years ago. I'm currently working for Interior Health as a nurse. I know that in order to provide really good health care to anybody, especially an Indigenous person, you need to take the time to create relationship. Unfortunately, I have been one of those healthcare workers where it's so rushed that you can't even get to know someone's name. You can't get to know who their mother or their father are. As a Ktunaxa woman, when I was working one day, I was walking down the emergency hallway thinking about all the things that I have to do, so many things, do this, and I ran into this tiny little Indigenous grandma. She came up to me, she took her time, turned her walker around, and she sat down right in front of me. Stopped me in my tracks, and I had to hear her story about what brought her here. Not that I had to hear, I wanted to hear. I generally was taken out of the space of my to-dos, and my rushing task lists, my 10 steps behind, and I forgot about that for a second, and I wanted to just sit and have a conversation with this grandma. And I wanted to put up my own chair in the middle of the hallway while everything rushed and spun around you, and I just wanted to sit and have a tea. Time just kind of slowed down in that moment. It was really beautiful, honestly. I think she just really wanted someone that she recognized, someone that looked like her, someone that spoke like her. She was looking for a connection with someone, even though I was a total stranger. I feel that there is a lot for people to learn if they took a minute to listen and to create the relationship that they need, because I know that in order to provide really good health care to anybody, specifically, especially an Indigenous person, you need to take the time to create relationship, and that is commonly not provided. There's teachings that we could teach you regarding how to care for the earth, how to care for self, how we care for self. That can't be taught through modern medicine, I guess, more so. I would really appreciate if people were able to do that a little more, to sit down, to explain things, even if it requires an interpreter, and your 10 million task list actually has to stop for a second and you put it down and you have a full conversation about what it is that you know and what you can share. And if that means they have to sit with someone else to share that information, I've sat with many people and I've heard what the healthcare provider had to say, and in turn looked at my patient and said, this is what they're saying. and changed it into simpler words, into easier concepts to digest, or similar languages or conversations that I know that we would understand as a unit or as a together. And I know the system doesn't allow for that, but if it could, it would move mountains. As a council member, as a nurse, and as an Indigenous woman, if we could take that and focus our healthcare systems on relationship as opposed to task, I think we would actually get somewhere.
Kisa kiukit tansekiawau bekanitzigasan namiatan awapmaten Manitoba Ochinia Sakahak Nuikin. So my name is Becca Britton. I'm originally from Treaty 1 and 2 territory in Manitoba, and I now have the great privilege to live in beautiful ʔamakʔis Ktunaxa in Sakahak, colonially known as Fernie, BC. I situate myself as an uninvited and grateful Métis guest living on these lands, and I raise my hands to the Ktunaxa Nation for their stewardship of this land historically since time immemorial and their continued stewardship. I work for Interior Health on the Indigenous Engagement team, supporting the Capital Planning and Projects team. As an uninvited guest living within ʔamakʔis Ktunaxa, it's really important to recognize Ktunaxa sovereignty of this territory. And some of the ways that I have learned to do that is through learning Ktunaxa language, doing my best to practice words, learn the names of the communities, and really work on pronunciation and to honor that language. The Ktunaxa Nation has done such an amazing job and continues to work hard when it comes to language revitalization. So that's one way that I think is really important as guests here, that we honor that language. The other thing that I think is really important is to learn the creation story. As Interior Health, we aren't accommodating Ktunaxa needs. We are working in collaboration with the nation to support and to uphold their sovereign and inherent right to health, to healing, and to traditional wellness. And so just changing that mindset of accommodation to supporting an inherent right and honoring an inherent right and working together to make that happen.
If someone from Interior Health has read our story, they're going to now understand our story. And they're going to be, I guess, kind of at that foundational level, at the foundation of our expression of our sovereignty in our homelands. The creation story is a foundation for that. I would like Interior staff to kind of reflect on where you might be from. And what is that story of where you're from? Do you know the sovereignty story of where you say you're from? Right? If you say you're Canadian, what is the Canadian sovereignty story? What is the story that actually gives this Canadian government this power? What is the story? Our creation story talks about us being placed here at the beginning of human time.